Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Lots to share with you tonight. Here to analyze the political and cultural stories of the week and the threats coming from North Korea is syndicated columnist and author Pat Buchanan. And later, Pope Francis offered his view on the fundamental role of women in the world. We'll discuss that and the ongoing battle for religious freedom in the U.S. with Archbishop William Lori, the chairman of the U.S. Bishops' Ad Hoc Committee for Religious Liberty. Finally, one rape occurs every 2 minutes in the United States. There are literally millions of survivors of these assaults who still carry the wounds with them every day. Tonight we'll be joined by a woman who found spiritual healing after a sexual assault. Dr. Marguerite Ogden will share her very moving story of survival and hope through faith in our final segment. As always, I want you to be part of the program. The number, 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. and internationally 205-271-2980, or drop us an email at worldover@ewtn.com. But first, here's the brief news from the world over this week. Renewed violence against Christians has erupted once more in Nigeria. 80 people are reported dead, mostly women and children, after armed assailants, allegedly Muslim herdsmen, surrounded and attacked 4 villages on Holy Saturday and Easter Sunday. More than 4,000 villagers fled, only to return to find loved ones and neighbors murdered and their properties ransacked and destroyed. Archbishop Ignatius Kaigama of Jos, president of the Nigerian Bishops' Conference, condemned the attacks and the lack of government protection. He told the Vatican's Fides news agency, "We're amazed at how these gangs are able to attack the villages and security forces do not intervene. Police and soldiers appear on the scene only when the attackers have gone away. The situation is alarming." Government officials estimate that there are approximately 100,000 refugees owing to the recent violence. And the Cyprus bailout by the European Union has again averted a financial collapse there, at least for now. Cyprus's leading prelate on Sunday criticized its government for agreeing to the terms of the bailout. Orthodox Patriarch Archbishop Chrysostomos II said that the government's decisions were both illegal and contrary to the Constitution. Emergency laws passed last week empower Cypriot authorities to seize bank deposits and convert them to bank shares worth dimes on the dollar. In order to avert the latest Eurozone crisis, member nations demanded that big depositors in the country's 2 largest banks accept across-the-board losses in order to pay for Cyprus's $20 billion bailout. Chrysostomos further questioned whether Cyprus should remain in the euro. Back in the United States, attorneys general from 13 states are calling on the Obama administration to issue a broad exemption to its contraceptive and abortifacient mandate. On February 1st, the Department of Health and Human Services issued its latest exemption proposal to the Obamacare requirement that employers cover free of cost contraceptives, including sterilizations and abortifacient drugs. HHS had proposed that houses of worship and some nonprofit religious groups which meet certain requirements be exempt. The attorneys general, however, are urging for full conscience protection for any employer, profit or nonprofit, religious or not, who morally objects to the mandate. More than 24 private companies have already filed suit seeking relief from the mandate. More on this in our next segment. And as the debate on free contraceptives or over free contraception continues in the U.S., a new law in France went into effect, providing free abortions for all women and free contraceptives for minors. Socialist President François Hollande made good on his campaign promise, upping the government's reimbursement for abortions from 70% to 100% for all women. Previously, contraception for minors ages 15 to 17 were also partially subsidized. And the Archdiocese of Portland, Oregon officially recognized and received their new shepherd on Easter Tuesday. Archbishop Alexander Sample was installed at a Mass held on the campus of the University of Portland. During the Mass, the 52-year-old Archbishop, the youngest metropolitan in the United States, encouraged Catholics to come to know Christ intimately and profoundly so that they can share the good news with fearless proclamation. Before coming to Portland, Archbishop Sample was, since 2006, the Bishop of Marquette, Michigan. The Portland Archdiocese is home to more than 400,000 Catholics, covering Western Oregon from the Pacific Coast to the Cascades. And back in Italy, the purported burial cloth of Jesus, the Shroud of Turin, got its own TV special on Saturday. New scientific research dates the linen to around the time of Christ's death. The 14-foot-long cloth, exhibiting evidence of wounds similar to those suffered by Christ, is kept in a bulletproof, climate-controlled case in Turin's cathedral and is only rarely open to the public. Pope Francis offered a special video message for the event, noting that the image conveys a great peace. The television event coincided with the release of a book based on new forensic tests that researchers say date the cloth to the 1st century and not the 13th or 14th century, as others have claimed. The research was published by a professor of the University of Padua. The findings are expected to be submitted to peer review. Vatican officials and the Pope on Saturday stopped short of asserting that the image is definitely the Shroud of Jesus. And finally, another gesture of Christian charity by Pope Francis has captured hearts around the world. At the conclusion of his Easter Sunday Mass, Pope Francis stopped the Pope Mobile in St. Peter's Square to greet a 9-year-old Dominic Gondru, suffering from cerebral palsy. The Pope hugged the boy for several moments as an obviously delighted Dominic returned the embrace. It will be a moment long remembered by those who saw it. The boy's father, Paul Gondru, says the Pope was embracing all the impoverished in that moment, not just their family, but all parents of special needs children or all those who are close to special needs people. As I always say, gestures and images always speak louder and linger longer than mere words. A lovely moment. When we return, columnist and author Patrick Buchanan joins us to discuss the saber-rattling of the North Korean dictator, federal gun control legislation, and much more. The World Over Live continues in a moment. You stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. The North Korean nuclear threat, federal gun control legislation, and immigration reform are looming large in the headlines this week. To sort it all out for us is syndicated columnist, author, and former presidential candidate Patrick J. Buchanan. Pat, welcome home.
Thank you, Raymond. It's good to be here.
This was your old digs here.
Bill Press and I at the great MSNBC conservative network spent a lot of time here.
Well,
bastion of right-wing thought.
You're back, my friend. You're back. Look, let's talk about what's happening in North Korea. You've got Kim Jong-un, his consistent threats that he can and will target U.S. sites, Washington, D.C., Austin, Texas, L.A. Is this a possibility, or is this just empty saber-rattling? What is he doing with this?
No, he cannot hit the United States of America, the homeland of the United States, with nuclear weapons. I don't think he's married a nuclear weapon to a missile. But what he has done is he's got one threat after another against South Korea, the United States. He has cut off all ties to South Korea, and he has made these threats. He's got himself out on a limb where I'm afraid, Raymond, he cannot crawl back without being humiliated. And if there is an incident, and that's what I would expect if something happens, something like his sinking or the North Korean sinking of that South Korean patrol boat a few years ago. If he does that, the South Koreans and the Americans have indicated, look, we have put up with these atrocities under Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. This time we're going to retaliate. I think there's a real danger of a war by accident with North Korea, but I don't think a nuclear war.
Oh. I want to play something for you. This is Chuck Hagel, the defense secretary.
Right.
He's apparently taking this, and the Obama administration are taking these threats very seriously. Listen.
As they have ratcheted up their bellicose, dangerous rhetoric and some of the actions they've taken over the last few weeks, present a real and clear danger and threat to the interests, certainly, of our allies, starting with South Korea and Japan, and also the threats that the North Koreans have leveled directly at the United States regarding our base in Guam, threatened Hawaii, threatened the west coast of the United States.
So he's taking this very seriously, Pat, and North Korean military officials say they have orders to use what they call smaller, lighter, and diversified nukes. But you don't buy that.
No, I don't buy it. I think they may have exploded a uranium explosive, but I don't think they've weaponized it. But here's one problem. This guy's about 30 years old. He says we're going to weaponize our missiles. He will be able to do that in 4 or 5 years. And then he becomes a threat to South Korea, Japan, U.S. bases, and even the United States. How long do we live with this? I think that would bring South Korea and Japan and make them nuclear powers.
Yeah.
But let me tell you what the danger is. The demilitarized zone is a few miles wide, and Seoul, South Korea is about 25 miles from the DMZ. North Koreans have 14,000 artillery pieces and thousands of mortars and hundreds of aircraft. If a war should break out along that DMZ, the most explosive border in the world and most heavily fortified, I think it would be a disaster for both countries, a horrendous disaster. And what I believe the President of the United States should do, and we should do, we ought to find some bridge to get this clown where he can walk back across it and get himself out of this, as I said, out on a limb, get him back so that he doesn't do something that leads to war.
Now, I spoke with Frank Gaffney today, who's a national security expert. Now,
what did Gaffney want to do?
Well, Gaffney claims that what he could do, and he believes he's capable of it, Northern Korea is capable of it, of launching an attack and sending a nuclear device of some sort, exploding it in space, and this could cause one of these electronic pulses that would shut down transformers, our electricity. This could be
It's
terrible.
the electromagnetic. It's the weapon that you explode a nuclear weapon above Japan, and really wipe out everything. I don't think he's got that capability. I don't think Frank thinks he's got that capability, but he could develop that capability. Look, if he exploded a nuclear weapon, I don't know how he'd get it across to the DMZ, but if he did that, I mean, you've got a potential nuclear war with the United States. And that's what those B-2s flying over to South Korea.
That's what I was just about to say. They sent the F-22s. They sent stealth fighters over the region. Is that enough? They're moving anti-missile defenses into Guam. What else should the administration be doing?
I think that's, to be honest, you got 2 stealth fighters. Don't amount to a hill of beans. You sent the B-52s over there. That's serious. And you sent those 2 B-2 bombers from Missouri, 13,000 miles, dropped dummy bombs on South Korea and then flew back. That is the equivalent of Clint Eastwood pointing his .44 Magnum at your head and saying, "Go ahead, make my day." Now that's dangerous. I think that was almost a real provocative thing. That makes it very hard for Kim Jong-un to back down
without losing face.
Without people saying, "Look, the Americans sent the B-2s over. You got the message. You back down." His father and grandfather have engaged in terrorism and murderous attacks, all of them with impunity against the United States. They axe-murdered 2 American officers in the DMZ, 1976. They attempted to assassinate the president of South Korea, blew up half his cabinet in Rangoon. Nothing has happened. This time, I think, if he does something, something's going to happen and we're in real danger of a war.
No, North Korea, this regime is unbelievable. I mean, it is also one of the, always cited as one of the most outrageous offenders of human rights, to say nothing of religious rights. I mean, Christianity is basically outlawed there. It is amazing what goes on in the terroristic acts committed against people.
They got hundreds of thousands in penitentiaries and concentration camps. And millions of people have starved in that country. And now they're cutting off. I mean, here's the thing, though, that the real country that has influence with them provides food and fuel and trade without which they couldn't survive. is China. And China cannot be happy about the fact that they're provoking a war with the United States and South Korea, because China, in effect, is supposed to have a leash on this character, and it's not pulling it.
Yeah. If you have a question for Pat Buchanan, 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. is the number, or internationally 205-271-2980, or drop us an email, worldover@ewtn.com. Pat, I want to move on. There was a hearing last week in the Florida legislature. It was a Planned Parenthood lobbyist. Her name is Elisa Snow, and she spoke to some of the legislators about actions there. They want to limit Planned Parenthood.
Right.
There are moves across the United States to defund some of the state money that's going to Planned Parenthood, to say nothing of the hundreds of millions of federal dollars going there. Here's what she had to say when questioned about what to do with a child who is born alive in an abortion clinic. Listen.
Along the same lines, you stated that that a baby born on a table as a result of a botched abortion, that decision should be left to the doctor and the family. Is that what you're saying?
It should. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That decision should be between the patient and the healthcare provider.
Go ahead, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that at that point, the patient would be the child struggling on a table. Wouldn't you agree? You're recognized.
That's a very good question. I really don't know how to answer that. I think, I would be glad to have some more, conversations with you about this.
She'd have to have some conversations. You wouldn't be sure if the child would be a patient or not.
Moral vacuity. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, a baby on a table that's alive, and they're making a decision whether or not to kill it? I mean, that's his infanticide. They're prosecuting this one character. Where is it, Philadelphia or New York?
Right.
Just a horror show. I mean, he had the babies, had survived these abortions, and they're there, and he's in there cutting the spinal cord.
Yeah, no.
This is unbelievable. That is infanticide. He's on trial for his life, and he ought to be. But what that tells you is what all of these abortions are. They are the killing of innocent unborn children. Look, I know you and I have been with aunts, uncles, cousins, everything. Been in there when the girls go up, he had a baby, it's a boy, and we're all come over and see the baby. The joy of it all, and to see this cold-blooded decision being made like that.
Well, it's remarkable. Planned Parenthood has since clarified in a statement that no, we would naturally consider the health of both the mother and the child at that point. But it was a very interesting admittance in front of this committee, and caused a firestorm, as you can imagine. I want to move on. There's a Quinnipiac poll out just today. 56% of people polled think and believe same-sex marriage should be decided by the Constitution, by the courts, not by the states. Your reaction to that?
Well, I don't, if you knew what Jefferson and Madison and the rest of them thought about homosexuality, General Washington drummed them out of his army. Thomas Jefferson believed homosexuality should be punished on a par with rape. He was partly responsible for the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. Look, I think my view is, and obviously you know my view on same-sex marriage, I think this really ought to be decided by the people in the various states. Quite frankly, if we're becoming a pagan country, state after state after state, to the point where people are so obtuse that they can throw away 2,000 years of history and declare that the two men can get married and defy the very definition of marriage, that's something that ought to be done by the people and certainly ought not to be imposed. And I think the Supreme Court wants no part of discovering a right to same-sex marriage in the Constitution. As Justice Scalia said, can you tell me exactly when it was put in there?
Yeah, when it was unconstitutional, when it became unconstitutional.
When it became constitutional,
Yeah,
right.
It seems everybody wants to run. Even Elena Kagan and Sotomayor gave indications that they...
Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, we made a mistake with the abortion, discovering a right to an abortion, because it caused a civil war in this country when the whole thing was being argued out politically. But I tell you, it still tells you something about the character of the country if people are voting for this. And look at a lot of these Republicans and others. I mean, they're showing the courage of wildebeest in the Serengeti on seeing this pole. It's like the cougars in the grass. Get moving. You've seen those films. They're going back.
The herd is moving that way. Now, relative to that, one of the great icons, certainly, of American politics and in the conservative movement is Ronald Reagan, a man you not only worked for, but with very closely. Now, his children, Michael Reagan, says Ronald Reagan would be opposed to same-sex marriage, or it's hard, you know, at the time when he was president, he would be opposed. Today, he couldn't even forecast that. Patty Davis, his daughter, says her father, Ronald Reagan, would support gay marriage. I'm leaving it to Judge Buchanan to split the difference
Ronald
here.
Reagan I knew had a politically incorrect sense of humor. And I'm afraid if I went into the Oval Office and said, this is what they are asking us to do, he would have been responding with jokes.
Okay, I won't ask you to elaborate, but I can only imagine. So you don't think he would at all support this?
No, I don't.
Really?
He was a traditional conservative, and he got more so. You know, as you know, he signed that abortion bill in 1970. And he profoundly regretted that all of his life because he came more and more to think and understand. And he was one of those, a man who never stopped thinking and reading and studying and learning. And that's why he became, I mean, he used to come into meetings at lunch. We'd have senior staff meetings and he'd come in. Ann Higgins, one of you'd have a letter. Let me read you. I know you guys don't like this. Read you a letter from some woman, wonderful letter about how she didn't have an abortion and the one son who's her youngest, is now taking care of her in her old age. It was magnificent. And I remember leaving with a White House aide, and he says, where does he get these letters? Ann Higgins was a little center of Opus Dei down in the back in the what we call the letters department.
So she would filter them up.
She would put them in the 20 letters she'd get every week, two or three of those.
Shuffle them in. Let's talk for a moment about the Bishops' Conference are calling for universal background checks, a federal universal background checks on gun purchases, limits on high-capacity rounds, and a ban on so-called assault weapons. The bishops are saying, and Sister Marianne Walsh, their spokesman, said this week, this is a pro-life approach. What is wrong with that, Pat? Isn't it pro-life?
There's nothing wrong with people having these opinions, but I don't think this is a clear secular issue. It's a serious argument about whether this is going to be effective, whether the costs are worth it, all the rest of it, whether the assault weapons ban didn't do much of anything when we had it. But I don't really think, my view has always been that the church ought not to be taking an official stand on issues like that. They ought to train the lay people and then let them basically make the decisions. I mean, have they made any decision about how Nancy Pelosi's position and Vice President Biden's position on right to life? Have they condemned that? Did they suggest maybe they shouldn't be going over there to the installation of the new pope? I mean, but this issue, the country's divided on this, deeply divided on this. There are people who believe that the possession of guns and the possession of individuals in their homes, the brandishing of them has stopped an awful lot of crime, and that this assault weapons ban wouldn't do a thing. Listen, what I've got personally, you know, I'm a gun owner. I've bought a lot of guns in Virginia, and every time I went down there, I had a background check, but they would call the state police and they'd call the FBI. I'd talk to the pit bull behind the counter for a while I came back in with the news. I didn't have any problem with it, but I can understand one of the problems with it. They're going to get a huge registry of everybody's guns, and what happens then when the Supreme Court overturns Heller? That decision which says you do have a right. Only that was a 5-4 decision.
No, and I can understand the bishops.
Sure, I can understand their view.
We wouldn't want the bishops to say everybody should load up, get the biggest gun. I mean,
you don't want the
terrible.
bishops to say, look, everybody should have an AR-15 in their home, right?
But your problem is assigning onto a specific piece of legislation rather than laying out a moral.
Exactly. I mean, if it's a moral issue like right to life, and I understand that, but if these are issues on which I think Catholic and conservative and traditionalist laymen and liberal Catholics can have honest, different opinions, and I think the church shouldn't have an opinion on that.
Let's go to the phones. Kevin from Ohio. What's your question? You have something on North Korea?
Yes, I'd like to say hi, Mr. Buchanan, first of all. And my question is, our government was very quick to pull the trigger on Iraq on assumptions of weapons of mass destruction. And we got this crazy guy. We know he's building them, and he's practically pointing the trigger at us. We had intel on 9/11. We had intel on Benghazi. I mean, what do? Sit around and wait for him to nuke South Korea, Guam, possibly America? I mean, what are we waiting on?
Well, first off,
Now, you weren't exactly a fan of that.
I wasn't a fan of the Iraq War. But let me say, look, I don't believe the United States believes he has married a nuclear weapon to a missile. If we believe he has, and if we saw him basically gearing up that missile, I would favor a preemptive strike. But I think our Defense Department intelligence don't believe that. Now, if he's going to do something like a conventional strike like they did the last time on a patrol boat, I think you wait for him to make the first move, because I don't know that he wants to make the first move, and I think you can wait. But if I believe, sir, what you suggest, that he's got a nuclear weapon and that he was going to use it, I think you can make a preemptive strike on that.
In our final minute, Pat, there is a story coming out of Ohio. This is the Jackson City School District.
Right.
There was a picture of Jesus, a painting, that is hung in the hallway there since 1947, along with other dignitaries, former governors, etc.
Right.
It was taken down this week, and it sparked an enormous controversy. The American Civil Liberties Union and the Freedom from Religion Foundation threatened to sue if the picture didn't come down. It was removed. Was that the right decision to save American taxpayer dollars from what they saw as frivolous litigation, or is that capitulation to the secularists?
I think it's political cowardice. And what is going on here, Raymond, is that the United States is predominantly a Christian country, and the secularists have determined that their point of view, which is all religions are out, all expressions of that are gone, they are trying to impose basically secularism upon the United States of America. And I regret to say that in the last 60 years, they succeeded again and again and again. And it astonishes me that Christians do not fight back. Suppose, just for example, they say you can't pray before a game. Suppose every coach in a high school, Southern high school, said, look, nobody's got to participate in it. We're going to say a prayer before the game so that we win the game and nobody gets hurt, and do it. A little civil disobedience.
The Buchanan way. Pat Buchanan, thank you so much for being here.
Take it easy, Raymond. Good to be here.
Pat's book, Suicide of a Superpower, Will America Survive to 2025, is still available in bookstores everywhere, now in paperback and online. Up next, Baltimore Archbishop William Lori on Pope Francis and his continuing battle for religious liberty. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. Since his election, Pope Francis has captured the imaginations of many in the media and not a few Catholics. What can we discern from his early comments? Where does he plan to take the church? And there were a number of moments on the legal battle for religious liberty this week that bear mentioning. To explore all of it, we're joined by Archbishop William Lori, chairman of the U.S. Bishops' Ad Hoc Committee for Religious Liberty, who joins us from Baltimore. Your Excellency, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Raymond.
Let's start with Pope Francis. The world has watched this man, his gentle and I think simple, humble way of exercising his papacy have certainly drawn the attention of so many. Your impressions of what you're seeing, and where do you see this example taking the church?
He really has captivated the world and the hearts and minds of people. I was at a reception the other night, and I just mentioned his name, and the many people at the reception just broke into applause. In some ways, I think he reminds people of Pope John the 23rd by his simplicity, his love, his kind gestures. I think he is bringing our church to fundamentals. I think he is calling on us to look at what is essential in our life, to a life of simplicity, a life of charity, a life that is going to concentrate on the fundamental task and mission and identity of the church, which is evangelization, and really making the gospel accessible to everybody.
Yeah, no, he has a very easy way in communicating the faith and a simple way to communicating the faith to people. And some have said, oh, you know, it's too simplistic, we need more theology. I think when you look closely at what he's doing, he drives the message home in a way that's so practical that people are listening. And if you can achieve that in today's world, with all the media static, with everything going on, I think that's a major accomplishment.
I think what he's done by both word and gesture, he's taken the beautiful teachings of his predecessors and he sort of packaged them in a way that all of us can get a hold of them, make them our own, live them, and feel joyful about them. That's a lot to do in a very short time, but he's well on the path of doing that.
Reflect, if you will, for a moment on his comments this week. He talked about the fundamental role of women, and he accented the women who found Jesus' empty tomb and were the first witnesses, if you will, to the resurrection. And he said, in the church and in the journey to faith, women have had and still have a special role in opening doors to the Lord. He said, women have a primary fundamental role. The evangelists simply narrate what happened. The women were the first witnesses. This tells us that God does not choose according to human criteria. Your thoughts on those comments?
Well, first of all, there's nothing more fundamental than witnessing to the resurrection. And he's absolutely right. Women play an absolutely critical role in handing on the faith, certainly within the family. Certainly, I think of religious women who have guided our Catholic schools in so many generations, including my own generation. And we also think about the role of women in the church institutions. How many women are directors of religious education, superintendents of Catholic schools, chancellors, and other significant roles in the life of the church. So at a rather personal, familial level, through women religious, and I think very much through women's work in the church, they continue witnessing to Christ and to his resurrection in ways that really help pass on the faith from one generation to the next.
Archbishop, I want you to talk for a moment about some recent news we've been seeing out of the courts. As we mentioned earlier, there are many lawsuits against the Obama administration because of this HHS mandate, this contraceptive and sterilization and abortifacient mandate. One of them, the Hobby Lobby case, has moved forward. The entire nine-panel Federal Appeals Court is going to hear, nine-member Federal Appeals Court is going to hear the case in full oral arguments. At the same time, the EWTN lawsuit was swatted away and dismissed. Your reaction to these court advances as well as setbacks?
It's very interesting. With the so-called accommodation that came out from the administration some weeks ago, it seemed to aid and abet a direction that was already underway and that would have surprised many people at the beginning of this, namely that the private employers who want to run their businesses according to Christian principles seem to be doing okay. And one of the reasons for that is that they're already under the gun. The mandate is already kicked in for them, and the courts are saying this is a ripe issue. It's time to decide it, and a majority of these have won injunctive relief.
Right.
On the other hand, church organizations have this safe harbor until August, plus the courts are trying to weigh, and eventually will weigh, whether or not the accommodation, so-called, that the administration has granted gives relief from the religious liberty claims that we have been making. There have been some victories, however, and there are reasons to hope that eventually the court will engage not just the ripeness issue, but the substantive issue, and that we'll have a chance to show that the accommodation really does not give us the relief that we need to be able to do our mission according to our own beliefs and teachings.
Now, Archbishop, are you all supportive of the congressional efforts? I know there's at least one in the House to attach an amendment to a spending bill that would knock out the HHS mandate vis-a-vis the Congress.
Sure, we'd be very supportive of that. We would be supportive of legislation that would really bring us back to what we call the status quo ante, which is really giving us the ability, giving private employers, church institutions, and church-related institutions the freedom to be able to arrange our insurance plans according to our own teaching. We're good employers. They're fine insurance plans for the employees. And really, until the HHS mandate came 2 years ago, we were not part of the problem. Our church institutions and these private employers were part of the solution. We shouldn't be under this gun.
Archbishop, in our final moments here, I want you to talk about the Fortnight for Freedom, which is being revived for a second year. What will be done differently this year? It was a national effort last time, but it didn't have a central focus. There wasn't a central event. Is there something planned this time that where people can gather in one location?
Sure, let me sneak something in and then I'll answer it. I just want to comment that the HHS mandate has drawn more comment than any other aspect of Obamacare. And it's possible to make comments by clicking on to the USCCB website, go to issues. I'd invite everybody to make comments in defense of freedom. Now to the Fortnight. We are combining threats to life, liberty, and freedom. We're right on the cusp of the Supreme Court decisions with regard to marriage.
Right.
The HHS mandate for church institutions kicks in August the 1st. We have all kinds of other religious liberty threats that are bubbling up. So we're going to have the same two bookend events, an opening mass in the Baltimore Basilica on the 21st of June, concluding mass at the National Shrine July 4th. And we are providing kits for parishes and dioceses, interfaith groups, and Catholic lay groups to be able to organize, observe the Fortnight, and once again to say, our concerns about religious liberty are not a flash in the pan. This is a fundamental, ongoing struggle, and it's going to be with us for a long while to come. It's not just a problem, it's more akin to the pro-life movement. That is the direction we are going in.
And the Fortnight for Freedom is June 21st through July 4th this year, and you can learn more of that on the USCCB website. Thank you, Archbishop Lori. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, there'll be always a joy, Raymond. Thank you.
Thank you. Coming up, 1 in 5 women globally have survived a sexual assault. Dr. Marguerite Ogden will share her personal story of hope and healing when we return. Now, this is a very important segment, but I do want to warn parents that younger viewers may want to leave the room, at least for the early part of this interview. Viewer discretion is advised. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. Our final segment this evening deals with some mature themes. Viewer discretion is advised. According to statistics, 1 in 6 American women have been the victim of attempted or completed rape in her lifetime. That is well over 17 million women in the U.S. alone. Now, many of them carry the pain of that assault for years, telling no one. Tonight, I wanted to bring you the story of one woman who not only survived a sexual assault, but has found healing and hope through faith. Here to share her story with us tonight is Dr. Marguerite Ogden. Marguerite, thanks for being here. Now, you have an interesting background with EWTN. In 1989, you and your family went to Birmingham, sat in the audience of one of Mother Angelica's live show, and we actually found video of you as a little girl at the end of the show with Mother. Tell us what this is about, why you were there.
Before the taping, she came up to the audience, and she came up to me and said, "Hi, little girl, what are you going to do when you grow up?" And I put my hands on my hips, and I looked at her, and I said, "I think I'm going to take over your job." And so at the end of the show, this is what happened.
You know, a lot of people worry about my demise. They keep looking at me and say, "How old are you, Mother?" I said, "I'm 66 in April." And they say, "Wow, what's going to happen?" Well, tonight there's a little girl in our audience, and I asked her what she wants to be. And she said, "I'm going to take your place." So, sweetheart, come up here. Come on.
Come on.
All of you worried about my demise, here's the future. Right here. What's your name, sweetheart?
Marguerite.
Marguerite. You got beautiful eyes. You know that?
Thank you.
You're welcome. What are you going to do? Buy now.
Now, I want to move to a story, and it's a difficult segue, but 7 years ago, you were on a cruise ship with a girlfriend, and a terrible event happened. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I was in graduate school at the time, and I went on a cruise, like you said, with a girlfriend of mine for spring break. And we were out one night just talking to some people, and my friend was tired, so she went back to the cabin and went to bed early. And that night, one of the men on the ship put the date rape drug into my drink, and I woke up the next morning in a pool of blood and urine with black and blue marks on my arms from being held down.
No memory of anything.
And that's how the date rape drug works.
And did you tell somebody about this at the time?
Well, you know, the word shock is really an understatement when it comes after rape. You know, most rape survivors don't report the event. It's really it's a mix of just terror and bewilderment that happens. And so no, like most rape survivors, I didn't report the event on the cruise ship because my brain hadn't even fully comprehended.
You can't process which just happened.
You can't.
And because you don't have the full memory of it, I'm sure it's even more disorienting all along.
Right.
Now, you come back, you were a graduate student at the time in Washington, D.C. at a university. You go to a rape crisis center. Did they offer any help?
Yeah, psychologically they did offer help. You know, everyone, again, after rape definitely needs help healing psychologically, but spiritually, I felt lost. Yeah.
And you were at Mass one day. You started going to daily Mass.
Right.
And I imagine there's a lot of conflicting emotions, and from what I've read, there are common reactions after a violation like this that a woman or a person goes through.
Right.
Tell us some of what was happening to you in the aftermath.
Right. Yeah, I was going through post-traumatic stress disorder, which happens after a rape. So basically what happens is the brain is just so traumatized and doesn't know what to do to protect you from this happening again, because it doesn't know what even caused it. That with post-traumatic stress disorder, the brain starts to change all sorts of things about you. And so, for example, for me, I started to like different foods. You know, I gained weight. I was terrified all of the time. I was up at night. I felt disgusted toward men. And so, you know, you've just gone through a horribly traumatic event. You're terrified, and then you're having to be patient with yourself because the one person in life who's constant is yourself. You know who you are, you know what foods you like, but with post-traumatic stress disorder, even that changes, and so it's like a living hell.
Yeah, and part of the reason I wanted to do this segment is because I think there are so many women, men as well, who go through these traumatic moments, and they are filled with shame, they're filled with anxiety over what happened, they're trying to piece it together, and so many, according to the reports and the statistics, so many of these cases go unreported.
Yeah.
They simply keep it to themselves and carry it around like baggage. What I loved about your story is you found a way not only to heal psychologically, but spiritually, and it brought you to wholeness. You started going to daily Mass. Tell me what happened. You were in the middle of a Mass one day, and you had sort of a vision.
Yeah. You know how God works. I just so happened to have a break in my schedule at the same time there was daily Mass. And so I was going every day, and after the rape happened, when the priest would hold up the host and say, "This is my body," I would have a very vivid vision of Jesus in my head, naked, lying in a pool of blood and urine with black and blue marks on his arms. And at first I was disgusted and I didn't even understand it. And then I realized that Jesus was in the exact same position I was in after the rape. And that by that vision, Jesus was telling me, you know, even though he couldn't stop the rape from occurring due to the other person's free will, he suffered with me in a very real sense, that it was his body that was raped too. And when the priest would hold up the host and say, "This is my body," Jesus was telling me, you know, this is also my body.
Yeah, and so you were full communion with him, in a full communion. Tell me how that event was the catalyst for the healing that you eventually found. What happened as a result of that moment?
Yeah. You know, one other thing that happened after that was, while reading the Bible, another way God helped me heal was he really spoke to my heart and kind of told me that, you know, you are Jerusalem, and women who are raped are Jerusalem. You know, just like the city of Jerusalem, which is, you know, has wars and rapes and is plundered, Jerusalem has a very special plan in the Lord's mind. You know, there are many Bible verses about Jerusalem being the jewel in his crown.
Right.
And, you know, Jerusalem was precious to the Lord, as are women who are raped. So you're absolutely right. There was a retreat that followed. I was talking to one of my girlfriends named Raquel, who's a speaker for Project Rachel. And I was kind of wanting some empathy, and I said very sarcastically, "Isn't it nice how the Catholic Church does all this for women who've had abortions and nothing for women who've been sexually assaulted?" And so she looked at me pretty sternly and said, "Well, maybe you should do something about that."
And you did?
Yeah, so I talked to my spiritual director, and she led me to Cedarbrake Catholic Retreat Center in Austin.
Okay.
And so I worked with them to help develop a retreat for women who'd been sexually assaulted. And Bishop Gregory Egan was the bishop of Austin at the time. And he heard about the idea and loved it, and he sent some of their staff members to a conference on post-traumatic stress disorder. And they put on this beautiful retreat called Healing Hearts. Yeah.
And tell me about Healing Hearts. What is the form? And again, we want to make this resource available and let more people know about this, because as I said, so many people, I think, carry the burden of this, and they feel they have no place to go, even in the Catholic setting, to find the sort of spiritual healing that only the church really can provide them with. So tell me about this Healing Hearts program. What happens there? What form do these retreats take?
Yeah. You know, Healing Hearts was just so beautiful. I was one of the people who attended, and there were about 30 women at the first retreat. And, you know, the beautiful thing about it is that women were aged 16 to about 75. All races, some of them pregnant, and all of them carrying very deep wounds. Some of the older women had been carrying them since childhood and never have told anyone. But still searching for healing. And so we really, we shared our story, we found community. We received the sacrament of the anointing of the sick, because that's more than for just physical illness. We were given blessed teddy bears to sleep with at night, since a lot of us are fearful at night, a lot of women who've been raped. And we really all experienced God's love and healing in a very profound way.
Now, has this been replicated in other places? I'm sure, I know the attendance at these retreats have been pretty high.
Right, they have been, and you know, not that I'm aware of, they haven't been replicated, but it's such a need in our church. You know, like you said, 1 in 6 women is an awful lot of women, and a lot of them end up leaving the church. And so, you know, a great resource for dioceses or retreat centers or bishops who are interested in this, at Cedarbrake Retreat Center, Bev Collin and Brian Egan both have done this retreat multiple times and, you know the format. So anyone who's interested in doing a retreat like this wouldn't have to start from scratch.
Right, they have a curriculum for the retreat, a form for it that could be shared. What is the role of men in this healing? Because when the male is the perpetrator, and the aggressor here, I imagine, at least in the first immediate aftermath, you don't want to see a man, you don't want to talk to a man, and you don't trust men.
Right. Men are just imperative in healing. I mean, if you're a man who knows a woman who's been sexually assaulted, you have a very, very special place. A lot of men get nervous from sexual assault. They don't want to hear about it. They think that the woman doesn't want to be, even around men. But, I had a very special male friend named Chris who helped me so much this time in my life, because where there is desolation, there also has to come healing from that same place. Mm-hmm. And men can bring strength in a very gentle way, which is exactly what women who've been sexually assaulted need. So my friend Chris, every single day, would text me and tell me he was thinking of me, and if I wanted to talk, he was available. So he was never pushy. And at night when I was up, because I was terrified at night, he would always answer the phone and talk to me, and he was such a constant source of strength that he helped me heal towards men so much.
Well, we have a call. Agnes from Oregon. Your question, Agnes.
Hello there. This is a question for Margaret.
Okay.
I have not heard her mention, I don't think I did, but about if she has spoken to her parents about this.
Mm-hmm. Have you spoken to your parents about this? What's the role of parental support?
Yeah, parental support obviously is incredibly important, and I did tell my family about the rape after it occurred. Of course, I have two brothers who are lawyers, and so family members just are so angry, they want to take control of the situation, they're so mad at the person, but after a woman has experienced a rape, she's lost all control over her life, and so I had to tell my family to back off. They had the best of intentions, but a woman who's been raped needs to control the situation because they've just lost all control.
Right, right. And there's also that component where after the abuse, there is a common theme. You see it in a lot of the literature and reportage on the subject. At times, the women will return to the perpetrator and initiate a relationship with him because I imagine they're trying to take some control over what happened.
You're absolutely right. And, it sounds bizarre to people who've never been raped or experienced rape, but even after I was raped, I had the thought of going back to the man who had raped me and having sex with him consensually, which again is bizarre, and thank God I did not. But so many women who are raped just are so traumatized, they don't know what they can do to get some control back over their life. And so they think somehow that if I have sex with this person...
You can exercise the event in the past.
Right, yeah, and it doesn't work out. It adds more scars and more hurt.
What would you advise, what would you tell women, and no doubt some of them are looking in tonight, who have suffered from a rape or a sexual assault?
Yeah. For any women who've been sexually assaulted, I just want to say to them, first of all, it doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter what people said to you afterward. It doesn't matter what you did afterwards. It was not your fault. And Jesus loves you. He suffered with you. He wants to heal you. You are precious to him. And all I can say is just come back to Jesus.
Tell me about Healing Hearts, and that's what this retreat is called. And do you hope? I know it's going to happen. A lot of people are going to try to contact you and Cedarbrake Retreat Center because they're going to want access to this.
Yeah.
Give me a sense of what this does to the people who take part in it, this retreat.
It's just, it rebuilds a sense of trust, because after a sexual assault, what happens is you just can't understand how your loving Creator would allow such personal physical violence. You just can't comprehend it. And this retreat just, like the name that they chose said, it heals hearts. Your heart is broken, and the person who matters to you most is your God. And when that's been broken, there's nothing else to do but heal.
Well, I'm delighted you came on. I know how difficult this is to talk about, and I also know there are a lot of people who'd rather just avoid the topic, but it is so ubiquitous in society today. I thank you for your bravery coming on,
thank you,
for your candor, and your strength, and I know it will change and touch so many lives. Marguerite Ogden, thank you for being here. We'll stay in touch. If you would like more information on the Healing Hearts Retreat for survivors of sexual assault at Cedarbrake Catholic Retreat Center in the Archdiocese of Austin, Texas, or Diocese of Austin, Texas, call Brian Egan at 254-780-2436, 254-780-2436, or you can email Marguerite directly, you're going to regret this, Marguerite, at Marguerite, Marguerite, Ogden, Ogden, @gmail.com. That's all the time we have. The show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Go to RaymondArroyo.com, and there is a dot. The Twitter and Facebook pages are linked on the left-hand side of the site. You can also sign up for my weekly e-blasts on the website. I'll keep you updated on the latest news as it breaks. Be sure to tune in next week. Nina Shea and Rachel Campos Duffy will join us. In the meantime, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. We'll see you next time. Bye now.